Welcome to the Predictive Playbook. This is show number 3, and we're live, of course. And we're going to talk about the NCAA tournament. We're here with a special guest, Rob Veno, who is the founder and publisher of robvenosports.com. And also be sure to check out VegasOddsMachine.com. And Rob, welcome to the show. I'm pleased to have you on. The reason I have 3 shows in one day is because I have guys like you that are supporting these efforts, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be with me.
No problem, John. Glad to be here. First show we ever did just a couple of days ago, so glad that we could repeat this so quickly for what is, for guys in our industry, it's just a absolute monster weekend. Maybe, in my mind, probably the biggest weekend that we have throughout the season. So a lot to get through, and then it goes by so quick, so you wish it could stay around a little longer, but it does shoot by really quick.
Yeah, it does. And I like the schedule too, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. And that feels better. It doesn't feel like there's a huge gap between Sunday and then the next Thursday seems to take forever for the Sweet 16 rounds. But yeah, I think the committee did a pretty good job with this. I was telling you before we went on the air that when I saw Michigan State against UCLA as a play-in game, I was thinking, well, wait a minute, Syracuse got a seed, but Michigan State didn't. But that's what the power of these shows are, is that you exchange ideas, and now through all these shows, I understand why. And that's a game that I definitely have targeted, and the Bruins definitely can come away with a win there. But that's in the bracket that we're going to talk about on Friday morning. But it's stuff like that gets everybody so excited.
Sure.
Rob, I'll start the show off here with some machine learning stuff, and as most of you guys know at Wager Talk, I don't like saying machine learning because most people that say it are saying it to sound like smart. But it is what it is. There's artificial intelligence, there's machine learning, and then there's deep learning. And there are 2 subsets of artificial intelligence. And for the listeners, that's all you need to know. So what I did was I got the 538 probability data for each team to advance to the next round. I then compared it to my probabilities of the same thing, done completely differently. So I figured that the gap between the 2 would provide some insight to teams that you could take in your bracket that very few other competitors in your bracket are going to use. For example, Arkansas came up with very poor sentiment. In other words, the public is not betting them. They're actually avoiding them. Virginia is another team, but that's in a different situation. Gonzaga, everybody has Gonzaga winning the whole thing, and that's in the West, which we'll talk about on Friday. And everybody seems to hate Iowa, which we'll talk about on Friday. But that was number 1 worst sentiment. So if I was going to make a recommendation for your bracket, Rob, I would say you take Gonzaga maybe all the way to the region final, and then have them getting knocked off by Iowa. So you can think about that between now and Friday. Over here in the South, Baylor is a team that I just have a feeling that most people don't realize how good this team is, because they're in the shadow of Gonzaga, which is one of the best offensive teams we've seen in 20 years. Hartford, great season, conference champ, but I don't think they're going to be in Indy very long. We all know there's only been one 16 seed to ever beat a number 1, and that was Florida Gulf Coast, and that coach now is at USC. The game here, Rob, I'd like to hear your opinion on is North Carolina, Wisconsin, because initially I thought in the bracket, wow, Baylor gets Hartford, but then they have the winner of this game, and I have to think that North Carolina is going to put a little bit of a scare into Baylor with their rebounding, their offense. They're always one of the best rebounding teams in the country, especially offensively. And if North Carolina lines up with Baylor, that could be an interesting game to watch, because they'd probably be lined at about 6.5 points. But first, what do you think about the North Carolina-Wisconsin game?
Well, obviously, where North Carolina, Wisconsin is concerned is the contrast in styles that, you have to almost as a handicapper decide which one of these two teams do you think will impose their will on the other. UNC for years under Roy Williams, it's no secret they want to go up and down. The faster, the better. And Wisconsin, obviously under Greg Gard, no different than Bo Ryan before him. They want to play slow, methodical, defensive style basketball. The problem for Wisconsin, and it's going to be interesting, John, now that the Big Ten teams are let out of the Big Ten box and they get to go and play teams from other conferences, because it's easy to say Wisconsin's in a down year. But is it a product of their surrounding teams inside that conference? I mean, it's hard to win in that conference. Obviously, you've got two number 1 seeds, a number 2 seed coming from that league. So maybe Wisconsin's results are a product of just playing superior competition all season long. If North Carolina were thrown into there, how would they have fared? We don't really know. And that's where you get a lot of answers, is in this tournament, and where you have to make a lot of projections is betting this tournament. So either you're going to be right or you're going to be wrong. But that's the stuff that you deal with here when you mix these non-conference teams together. It's not as easy as saying UNC was in the ACC and the ACC was not as good this year, and Wisconsin was in the Big Ten and the Big Ten was really good this year. You match them up. I don't like guys who – I shouldn't say guys. I should say I don't like the philosophy of playing conference as a blanket statement. I'm going to play all the Big Ten because the Big Ten is the best. These games, like any other games, are situational. These teams all come in with different mentalities. So you have to kind of treat them that way. In this particular instance, you mentioned North Carolina's height. It's always going to be an advantage for them on the boards, always going to be an advantage, and it will be one here. However, Wisconsin has big guys, Micah Potter and company, that can drag North Carolina big men away from the rim and shoot threes. So it'll be interesting to see these coaches, John, because of the 7-day rule for testing negative for COVID is why we're pushed back to Friday. And it gives these coaches an extra day to prepare for these teams. So this first game, there's plenty of time for Greg Gard to go through a game plan for UNC. There's plenty of time for Roy Williams to figure out how to push tempo with the other side. I do think, personnel-wise, athletically, North Carolina is better, but that's not saying much because that's generally the case with any Wisconsin team, even their Final Four team. Wisconsin's got veterans on that squad. It's as difficult a game as there is, but I will say this: Wisconsin's been able to, and not been able to, but they've been scored upon a little more this year than they have been in recent years. So I initially looked at the total. The total sits, I think, as we go on the air here, somewhere around 137 and a half. Which may be doable for these two teams because the youth in the North Carolina backcourt, I think, can be picked apart by Wisconsin. And you mentioned the rebounding and height factor, second chance points probably for UNC. If you get enough free throws, I think maybe over, but it's a game that I haven't gone to the window with yet. Still investigating it, but I would say the way I'm looking at this time is toward over.
Yeah, current total is 137 and a half. Across the board, Bookmaker, DraftKings, New Jersey, Heritage. Yeah. And then, by the way, that Vegas odds machine of Rob's is pretty cool because it lists by state the legal books. So, from Colorado to Pennsylvania to New Jersey, all of them. And it actually will pick up your location and list the state that you're in. So I think that's a pretty cool feature of that odds page. But with this North Carolina team, to me, my gut's telling me they're just about ready to burst out and get their play to another level. And then, of course, I could be dead wrong, but I would like to see the Baylor-North Carolina matchup. Moving on down the board here. We have Villanova Winthrop, and of course Gillespie is out for Villanova, which is, it's sad for the team. And I'm in the Philadelphia region now, and that is not that far away from me, and it's part of the Big Five, which is a conference that is not official, but it's a fun conference to to take into games at a place called the Palestra. And, it's Villanova, LaSalle, Temple, Drexel, and who am I forgetting?
St. Joe's.
St. Joe's. That is correct. So obviously Villanova is the cream of the crop in there, but 20 years ago they had wars. So I think here, you have the public is all over Winthrop. The recency bias towards Villanova is giving a terrible sentiment off that machine learning application I ran. So I actually have a lean towards Villanova on this. I think you can't underestimate Jay Wright. He's one of the best coaches, if not top 3 in the nation, especially tournament time. And Gillespie's out, but there's also probably a 4-star recruit or 2 sitting on the bench that can't wait to get in the game. And when Gillespie went out, they had very little time to adjust and get that bench player in there and have the chemistry in pretty solid ground. But now they've had time to do that. So I think for that reason, I definitely lean Villanova to get by Winthrop. And then they would play the winner of Purdue and North Texas. But what are your thoughts on the Villanova team?
Well, I think you hit it on the head there where Villanova's concerned, John. And I'll go back to the very last game that they played, which was in the Big East tournament against Georgetown, a game where they were behind significantly in that game. And, it was their first crack at it without Connor Gillespie. And they made a run and almost won that game. Georgetown ends up winning that tournament, but I think it was only a 2-point victory over Villanova, despite they didn't have the fact of not having Connor Gillespie. So it shows that in game between first half and second half, Jay Wright was able to make some improvement in his squad's performance. So now, as you mentioned, you're going to give him from the conclusion of that game, or let's say from the time he drew an opponent of Winthrop, so Sunday afternoon, we're going to give him all the way till Thursday to get his team ready for this. I think they'll be well prepared. They'll have the best player or the best defensive player on the floor in Robinson Earl for sure. But Winthrop, we can't sell short. I've seen them play a few times. It's a team that wants to go. Again, we'll get a tempo contrast because Winthrop can put up points in bushels very quickly. And the Villanova squad, generally speaking, is very methodical in their tempo. They want to get you into a half-court grind to utilize their half-court defense. And the plays that they run, the sets that they run, they can execute on their end. So will they frustrate? A lot of times the slower tempo frustrates the faster team. There's times when, the slower tempo team, the more methodical, doesn't hit shots, and there's a lot of runouts. Winthrop, as in most of these mid-major to low mid-majors, when they get to this point, they're usually veteran built. They're a veteran squad. Very good coach in Pat Kelsey. I don't know if the number's too short at this point in time. 6.5 against a big-time opponent in Villanova. But I do know that Winthrop's got a great backcourt, and Villanova's going to be up against it here. Just get a victory, never mind to win by margin. So to me, again, a game I didn't play. I don't have a real preference. I know that the in thing to do, John, or the cool thing to do when these tournaments are bracketed on Sunday is to go through and pick out every 12 to 16 seed and tell the nation how much you love them and how nobody wants to play them. And that's the case with a bunch of these teams in this tournament. You're hearing a lot of stuff as the week goes on about how these upsets are going to happen. All these 12s are going to beat all these 5s and so on. And it's not because the mid-major or the low mid-majors aren't good teams. But I think it gets overblown by quite a bit, to tell you the truth. I think it really gets overblown because a lot of times I think the people that are saying this stuff don't even know, haven't watched 2 Winthrop games, but yet they're going to tell you to go ahead and bet Winthrop. It's a really good squad, but I would never sell Jay Wright short in any circumstance. I think if you're betting in-game in this one, I'd probably wait and see how Jay Wright adjusts to this team and then pick a spot and play Villanova, especially if they're behind, because I have all the faith in the world. As I just mentioned, he managed to do it against Georgetown. I think he could manage to do it here too. Don't know if he'll cover 6.5. Maybe this is game just better left for in-game betting.
Oh, I love that idea, Rob. Positively, because what I've been saying like all week on most of the shows is you get the 10-point run by the opponent, meaning the opponent, you bet on a team, Villanova. You look for a run of 10 or more points by Winthrop, and you do the live line right then and there. Because we all know they have streaks, and maybe you don't get a 10-point run. So what I do is 50% pre-flop, then I go usually 25-25. Sometimes if it's a very high total, I know there's a game that's in the 160s. I think that's Iona.
Yeah.
There I would probably go like 15, 15, 15, and then a 20 for the other 50%. Or a 5, I mean. It would be 3 15s and a 5%er. But you like plan this out. Like if it's 6.5, you want to add at Villanova probably -1.5. Then the next level is going to be Villanova plus 1.5. And then your last piece, if you still have room for it, is to look for a plus 3.5 or more. The mistake I think people make, Rob, and it's kind of scary, is they'll bet a 4% amount pre-flop. So let's say it's $100. Villanova gets off to a bad start. Then they double up. Right. And then it goes more against their way, and then they double up again. And that's not how to take advantage of the in-game. It's not an opportunity to make a bad bet, initially bad bet, look good. And it's dangerous stuff, really. It can really get out of hand, especially in tournament season when you have all this hype and excitement and there's games all over the place. It's easy for someone to lose their control and fall into that trap. So try your best just to remember that and don't ever double up in game. Now, I know Rob would agree with me. I probably sound like a father right now scolding his son. Like, don't ever double up. At least in game. But I think in this game you'll have chances to get Villanova at a cheaper price than the 6.5. And you run the risk that you don't. But you have that opportunity then. So now that I'll step down from the pulpit once again. Let's see. I was looking at Jay Wright here. I have, believe it or not, I have a lot of database stuff. There's just a ton. I don't even know where to begin that supports him other than just saying come tournament time, he's the man. 51 and 32 against dominant rebounding teams, out rebounding their opponents by 7 or more per game. This one's not all that good, but it's still good. 64 and 38, facing good offensive teams, scoring 77 or more points per game after the 15th game of the regular season is played, including the tournament. And I could go on and on, but I won't. But there is a ton that supports him. So with that, let's move on to the next one down here. I don't have anything on Purdue, North Texas, Rob, unless you do.
Well, I'll say this, John. I lean fairly strongly toward the Purdue side in that game. The big man, Travion Williams, is going to be the dominant force in that game. John, real quick, for people that don't know a lot about Purdue, let's just say that it's a team predicated on 4 freshmen. And beginning of the season, when they would travel, when I was handicapping Purdue games, I didn't like the thought of having 4 freshmen on the road inside Big Ten Conference play, but they've proven themselves to be worthy. And the comeback that they had against Ohio State to send that game into overtime, they eventually lose, but I think it showed their mettle. And again, like we said about Wisconsin, it's another Big Ten team that is going to get let out of the box here, and they're going to get to go see other teams that don't know what they're about. Of course, they won't know what North Texas is about, but in watching the North Texas Western Kentucky contest for the championship of CUSA, we saw North Texas put up 14 points in the second half. Western Kentucky came out and defended, and in North Texas against a defense like Purdue's could have clamps put down to them. Again, it's a long shot underdog that has taken money immediately, maybe just because. But I don't know that that's going to happen here against Purdue. I would love to have, Purdue is an Indiana team, right? And this whole thing is being played in Indianapolis. And you would love to have some hometown fandom for Purdue here. And it might be. I know that tickets, I would say off the top of my head, John, without knowing the breakdown of the attendance at these games, that Purdue's going to get a little bit of extra fanfare. I know in tournaments that the crowd that's there generally will root for the underdog if the underdog is got a chance in the second half. But I think that Purdue may get a little bit of edge here as far as fans are concerned. I love their freshmen, the way they're playing now. The old saying, I forget which coach said it, but by this time of year, they're no longer freshmen anymore. Purdue played almost a full season worth of games here. And like I say, Williams can dominate in this contest down low. So I think Purdue, I'm going to make one general point about this tournament that I made on a show for Wager Talk yesterday that I haven't heard talked about quite a bit, if at all, until yesterday when I had mentioned it. And I have yet to see a picture, but the venues that these teams are going to be playing at. When you and I last talked, we talked about tournament play in a football stadium. Lucas Oil Stadium is being used for these games. It's bad enough, the teams that have to draw Lucas Oil Stadium. But Lucas Oil Stadium is being split into two courts for this tournament. There's a north court and there's a south court. Now, they won't play games simultaneously, but the shooting backdrop and whatnot on a half of a court, or half of the field uses a court here, I think it's going to be a little strange for all these teams playing their first time. And remember that none of these teams get to practice at the site they're going to play at. Everybody's practicing at the Indianapolis Convention Center, which I guess they set up multiple courts for everybody to practice at. And then you bus off the day of the game and play in your venue. This, to me, John, if you're in Lucas Oil Stadium, it's the hardest shooting background for teams to face. I think if you were going to blanket statement anything, I mean, from my perspective, you go in and you play all of these games first round under the total. I think there's 6 of them. And just see how it turns out. I mean, you may go 0-6. Who knows? They may come and shoot lights out. That's 19 to 22-year-old kids. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen. But I think if you're going to put yourself in the best position here, you find these games, Lucas Oil Stadium, either north or south, and when you have two defensive-minded teams like these two, Purdue and North Texas, play an under. I like Purdue as a side, but I do think under is a good way to look in those games. Second time around, when we get to Sunday, these Friday games become Sunday games. Maybe kids have their sight lines better and shooting gets better, but I wouldn't count on these teams shooting lights out in these two venues, in this one stadium and the two different courts. First time around, I wouldn't count on good shooting.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think we saw that in the Big Ten tournament. The first couple of days, there was more unders than overs. And you may want to know this supports Purdue. Seeds 13 through 16 in the NCAA tournament that are underdogs of 3.5 to 9.5 points and coming off 3 or more consecutive wins. You play against them, and you're 60-20 over the last 25 NCAA tournaments, 73%. And this definitely works against North Texas. Yeah, it's for me, it's Purdue or pass. But again, I always keep coming back to that live betting. Like, why even do pre-flop? If I like a game, maybe I'll just take a chance of the team going, leading the whole game by double digits right out of the shoot, and you don't get a chance to even bet it. But basketball is volatile, the scoring's volatile, and just like the marketplace, just like the stock market, you let that work for you instead of against you, and it's another example. And I have 3 systems that support the under here too, so I will not outline all 3 of them, otherwise we'll be here till 11 o'clock. But it seems like Purdue and under, which is what Rob was talking about, I think. So the next game going down here in the South region is this is an interesting matchup. Texas Tech against Utah State, a 6 seed against an 11. That's going to be on TNT, 1:45 in the afternoon on Friday. And, everybody's in love with Utah State. That was a team that, was on the cusp of not getting in or possibly being in, and now they have a seed. And I think they were properly seeded. But I honestly, I don't think they have enough to take down Texas Tech. And what do you think about this one, Rob?
Well, they've got some key components, certainly, that you would like. They've got the key big man. Cada underneath is an absolute beast for Utah State. And they got Brock Miller back, their top three-point shooter in that Mountain West Conference tournament where they made a pretty good push. And that was for a mid-major, that was a good league this year. All season long, Boise State, Colorado State, San Diego State, Utah State, even Steve Alford's Nevada team. All of those teams battled one another. So I think in Utah State's case, they come in battle tested. However, the Big 12 was an absolute jungle, so to speak, for these teams to navigate through. You've got very high seeds in this conference. I think the entire number of teams selected out of the Big 12 actually in a consensus seeding, they're seeded higher than any other conference overall. So it shows you the strength of this league, starting with Baylor, working down to Oklahoma State with Cade Cunningham, so on and so forth. Texas, who won the tournament, West Virginia, Bob Huggins. Texas Tech is battle tested as well. Both teams want to play defense first, and Chris Beard has been there, done that, right? They played Virginia tooth and nail for the national title a couple of years ago. This team isn't as good as that team, and the coach can only do so much. But certainly you've got an experienced head coach. You like that in this case. What I like about Utah State is they've got an experienced team. So I think that, if I was going to find a mid-major, John, that has a legitimate outright upset chance, I think Utah State is it, because I do like the big man Cada. I do like the fact that they can stretch you a little bit. But, boy, the competition, again, just like we said about the Big Ten, this is your second best conference. These teams are going to get out, and the rest of the nation is going to see these third, fourth, fifth, sixth place teams that, may look record-wise as mediocre. But when you're playing that competition every single night, I don't know. But I would probably, at this point in time, I think Utah State.
So you're looking at some of the rankings here, too. Texas Tech is 19th in strength of schedule, the infamous SOS. Utah State 75th, but that's not their fault. It's the conference. And this I didn't know. Texas Tech against the ranked 25, the top 25 is 3-8. And granted, that's Big 12 action, and that's
right.
It is the conference, just like I had previously said in the Big Ten, Penn State was the best losing record team I ever saw. So I don't know if you can draw anything with that. Utah State's played one team; they've gone 0-1. But you're right; their center is a great player to watch. I think he's averaging about 15.5 points per game, and
he'll protect the rim. Texas Tech won't get anything cheap at the rim with him around. Yep. So it'll be a one of those slugfest type games. This one, I think, John, let me look again. I thought it was being played. Yeah, it's being played at Assembly Hall, which obviously the home of Indiana University, which is a basketball arena. Much better sight lines and shooting ability than
for
what
sure
we talked about earlier with Lucas Oil. Total there was I'm looking 131 in that range. So that's probably they're asking you 67, 63, 68, 64 is what they're calling for. And that sounds kind of right in a game like that, to tell you the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. That's going to be a fun one to watch for sure. Then we have not really a sleeper that I think, but they're not being talked about very much, and it's Arkansas, the 3 seed, against Colgate, the 14 seed, and all we hear about is Colgate. Arkansas is in trouble. That's all I've heard since the bracket was formed. But I think Arkansas is that team that has the ability to get on a hot streak. They have the talent, and they could take down a Baylor. And I know that that opinion is probably not shared by many, but back to my bracket that I'm going to do for competitive reasons. When you enter your office pool or whatever you do, you want to have a team doing something that nobody else has, and that increases your odds of winning it. And I think you put Arkansas in the regional final. I don't think too many people are actually going to have that. So obviously, I like Arkansas to cruise through this game against Colgate. They then would play the winner of Texas Tech, Utah, which either one of those teams. That's not going to be an easy game for Arkansas to just cruise through. And then you got Florida, Virginia, the 7 and 10 seeds, and of course Ohio State is the second seed. So it's no easy track for Arkansas, but I think if they could get there against Baylor, that would be a fun game to watch. You agree or disagree with me, Rob?
Well, I'm going to say what you're saying. I'll say it for an additional reason because first and foremost, John, I'm a matchup guy, a fundamental handicapper. So maybe the fundamentals that I bring to the table, when they combine with the technicals that you're bringing to the table and they meet up and agree, we're onto something. But in these matchups, again, there's a bunch of them every year. Mid-major, low mid-major against Power 5 conference. And to me, if you're going to have success, low major, mid-major, you're going to have to do something that makes the other side uncomfortable, so to speak. What Colgate does best is exactly what Arkansas does best, and Arkansas does it better. So who do you want? Colgate, it's great when you play Boston U 4 times, and it's great when you play Holy Cross 4 times, and they do have ability. Don't get me wrong; they can get to 80 in a blink of an eye, but they have to. Their style is to go fast, to shoot threes. Arkansas' style is to go fast, to shoot threes. Arkansas, to me, is a far better defensive team with far better rim protection than what Colgate has. And I think if you get into an athlete-for-athlete battle in this game, you're going to come up Arkansas. So if Colgate was a slow, methodical team that could frustrate Arkansas from not running, you would think a different way. But when what they do best is what the better team does even better, I'm not taking Colgate. I would be on Arkansas. I don't think Arkansas will shy away from certainly Arkansas is not going to fear being in a running contest, a 94-foot contest with Colgate. And Colgate's not going to back down either. So that brings the total into play in this game, which currently, I think you mentioned it before, 162, the highest number we see on the board, 161.5, 162. I don't know that I would play it over because I'm not quite sure how Colgate will fare on the scoreboard against this type of defensive pressure. Remember, Arkansas head coach Eric Musselman, been there, done that very recently. Nevada went all the way to the game against Loyola of Chicago a couple of years back, and they were right there on the cusp of being in the Final Four. So head coach Musselman, certainly. Matt Lengel, a Pennsylvania guy, the head coach at Colgate, very good coach, has done wonders with that program. But give me the team, the Power 5 team that does what the little team does and does it even better. I'll take them any day. Since Justin Smith returned for Arkansas, which was, I think, 8 games ago against Missouri, in Missouri. This team has gone 7-1 against the spread. The only spread loss was, of course, the SEC game. They got knocked out of the tournament by LSU. No shame there. I think Arkansas is the right side.
Yeah, that's a great stat there, 7-1 for sure. I'll just add the Arkansas defense. As you know, Rob, I like assist to turnover ratios as a beginning point for the fundamental side, and Arkansas ranks 25th defensive opponent assist to turnover at 0.75, which means that for every turnover that they force an opponent to commit, that opponent is only getting 0.75 assists. Offensively, you want to have a ratio as close to 2 as possible. Twice as many assists as turnovers. Iowa is the only team in the tournament that has that, and they also rank number 1. Colgate is number 2 nationally, but not opponent adjusted. They have a ratio that's outstanding at 1.735, but I think they're going to have a lot more difficulty moving the ball, especially in the half court, against Arkansas, who does a real good job of clogging passing lanes and making it difficult to move the ball from side to side. So I definitely agree with you. Let's see now. We got now we're looking at Florida, Virginia Tech, and I simply cannot bet this game because I can't trust Florida, and I really don't want to take Virginia Tech. So I'm an official pass on this game, but I'd be interested to know what you think.
Well, we'll scoot through this quick, John, because if I had to make a play on every game, which you do in your brackets, office pool, whatever, I would probably go to the Florida side because I think they're the better team. But as you mentioned, they're tough to trust. What you're going to get from game to game, you can get a great game out of this team. You can get a mediocre game out of this team. But still, with Trey Mann back, they have to be the better side here. Virginia Tech has gone through so much this season. I don't know that, in the world of start, pause, start, pause, start, pause, I just don't think you can snap your fingers or turn that switch and get it going again. The only team I saw do that this season with any real success was Ohio U prior to the MAC tournament. Ohio U's 13 days off because of coronavirus, and then all of a sudden we don't get to finish our regular season. We have to go right into tournament play, and they absolutely destroy that tournament field. I just don't think Virginia Tech is the right side here. If I have to, I'll play Florida. I just think it's the better side. Total-wise, not really sure because when the season started, Coach White really had his team up and down the floor. That tempo that he brought from Louisiana Tech that he's talked about for years now was evident. Hasn't been so evident as of late, but I think it could benefit them here against Virginia Tech. So for a game that neither one of us has a lot of opinion on, I've probably talked enough. I would say Florida.
I would take Florida in my bracket as well. I think they have tremendous length, too, defensively with Castleton. I think he's pushing 7 feet. And the other, Trey Mann.
Right.
So I think that's going to make it tough for Virginia Tech. And Virginia Tech, what did I have written down here? Here's a stat that I think is kind of meaningless when you get to the tournament. And this is just like an education spot, especially for first-time bettors that are listening in. So matchups against tournament teams, you have to look at who the teams are that they played. A lot of these teams coming out of the Big 12 or the Big 10, their record is based on conference. So Virginia Tech's 3-3, Florida's 3-6. And I'm sorry to say the SEC was probably the third best conference this year, but there's a pretty big gap between the Big 10, the Big 12. So to say that, Virginia Tech's 3-3, they're better against these tournament teams, it has zero value. Absolute zero. So with that said, we'll put Florida in the bracket. And then the last game here is Ohio State, Oral Roberts. Obviously I think that we know who's going to win that game. So moving on to the Midwest, and I think this is one of the more exciting brackets. You have Illinois, who I have, I bet for the Big Ten championship. Obviously, I got lucky with that, but they did win. I also have them to win the NCAA tournament, and they're playing Drexel, which is one of those Big Five conference teams in Philly. Very nice team. Fundamentally sound, but they're going up about 4 steps or maybe even 5 steps taking on Illinois. So I'm pretty confident Rob's going to agree with me that Illinois will advance, at least in the bracket. Whether they cover or not is a different story. Any thoughts on this game, Rob?
Yeah, and I'll backtrack real quick. Just 2 quick thoughts about Ohio State Oral Roberts real fast. It was the first game, John, I looked at from a totals perspective. I think it's going to get over the number. It's a Greyhound-style game. Even though Ohio State is not top 10 pace or tempo, they're so efficient offensively, and they don't necessarily play slow. So they're going to get their share. Every season, or every tournament season, I should say, we find a team, low, mid-major, where there's a player that nobody sees play that all of a sudden hits the national stage. In this instance, Oral Roberts, Max Asmus, number 3, and they'll probably be wearing the dark uniforms in this game because they're the lower seed. Number 3 in black will be a guy to watch. This is a kid who scored 36 against Oklahoma State. No fear. Oral Roberts will run. Ohio State will go with them. So I think from a totals perspective, and even I think you could play them both. I think you could play first half over and game over. Ohio State obviously is not going to fear it, and Oral Roberts doesn't know any other way to play. So for me, just wanted to make those couple of quick points. Player to watch, maybe Max Asmus, and for me, that's one of the best scoring games. It's being played in Mackey Arena. Ohio State's players have a little familiarity with Mackey Arena. They do play there one time each year. Drexel, Illinois, I'm with you. I mean, Drexel's in for it. When I was watching that game, it's been so long that Drexel has been any good. When I was watching the CAA championship, and finally they come through, but it's not necessarily. How are they going to deal with Kofi Coburn? I mean, give me the biggest guy on. They'd have to stand on top of one another, and next to it would be taped to one another to be as wide in the lane. And they're just a team that I think physically doesn't match up whatsoever. It really depends on Illinois' interest in this game. And we said before, John, that these coaches have an extra day with this opening on Friday to prepare for their opponent. In most instances, some of these teams haven't drawn their opponent yet because they're in the first 4 in playoff games. But in this case, you've had an extra day to prepare for Drexel. I just wonder how much of this time by Illinois is spent on Drexel and how much is spent on the look ahead to the winner of Georgia Tech, Loyola Chicago. If they go into it with half mentality, we're going to breeze through this game, and we're more interested in the second game. Then 22.5 comes into play, certainly, and as does a 72-48 Illinois lead with 4 minutes left and the bench gets emptied. That comes into play too in these games where the price tag is this high. That's the danger you're in when you play the favorite. So Drexel is not going to give up no matter what, but they may be in awe of what they see. Illinois, again, I'd like to say you might want to play Illinois first half, but I feel like these lesser teams fight harder first half, and maybe when they realize the dream is ended, things might go astray. So it's a difficult game to play at this price range. Maybe, again, I'm going to check here real quick. This is played at Indiana Farmers Coliseum, which is the home of IUPUI. Over might be a good way to go. I just don't see Drexel stopping Illinois from scoring, and maybe at the end you get a lot of garbage points. But in this price range, this is tough to figure.
Yeah, I agree. And Drexel in their tournament, they shot lights out from the three. They hit 29 of 51 during that 3-game run to win the Colonial Athletic. So Illinois is going to have to defend the perimeter there pretty well, or they will fall behind early in the game. And then to your point, then the over really becomes an outstanding opportunity. Yeah, that's good. Then we have my team. Kyle Hunter and I were talking about Loyola Chicago about a month ago, and we went to the window on it at 50-1 and 45-1. Of course, if they made the Elite Eight, we would be hedging it, obviously. Mm-hmm. But they have the crappiest draw, I think, of any 8 seed that is not an 8 seed. They're more like a 5 seed or even a 6. And they get Georgia Tech, who arguably is one of the hottest teams in the ACC right now. And even if Loyola wins, they have the Illinois next. So, my dream of Loyola being an Elite Eight is kind of, the hopes are dashed. But these 8 9s, all 4 of them are incredibly intriguing, and all 4 of them are within 2 points on either side of pick 'em. And this is one of them. So you think Loyola has enough to pull this off, Rob?
This is a good basketball game. It's a real good, because I've been a fan of Georgia Tech for the majority of the season. I mean, Alvarado and DeVoe in the backcourt, and Moses Wright in the middle. And this is a formidable basketball team, as we just saw, right, against Florida State in the ACC championship game. So Georgia Tech's second half of the season has come on phenomenally. That backcourt is, it's a common phrase, as good as any in the nation. But I would say that backcourt is top 10 in the nation right now, the way they're playing DeVoe and Alvarado. They put pressure on you, and defensively and offensively. So for Loyola, again, a team that really likes to bring this thing down to the low 60s, maybe even high 50s. That's something Georgia Tech's not going to want to do. They don't do that better than Loyola does. So advantage Loyola in that aspect. I think overall size, athleticism, advantage Georgia Tech. But experience, you've got 4 guys in Loyola's starting lineup, John, that played in the Elite Eight and moved on to the Final Four. So these are guys that nothing's going to faze them. This is Georgia Tech's first time there under Josh Pastner. He's brought them a long way. So when we start dealing with the intangibles or the exteriors on the handicap here, those types of things, I think that Loyola becomes a play. I probably comes down to the wire. I don't think it's a game I'll get involved in. I really don't, because I can make good cases for both sides. But I think when push comes to shove, I like Loyola's experience, and I like the fact that they have a direct style of play, that they, when we talk about imposing your will and which team will do it, Loyola Chicago will impose their will on this game. Georgia Tech will have to be in a combat style half-court type game, which, like I say, is not necessarily their thing. And the other thing to consider is, does Georgia Tech come down off of cloud 9 quick enough after the ACC championship game? You know what I mean? I mean, that's a huge accomplishment for them to get to where they went in that league, and now to start all over again. Again, Loyola's been there, done that. They've won Missouri Valley championships and then gone through an NCAA tournament. So I think push came to shove, I would like Loyola, but it's a game I haven't played.
Yeah, Loyola is the real deal. They're number 1 in scoring, defense 55.8. Gonzaga can score that many and a half. Assists per game, they're allowing 9.5. Again, that's because of tempo mostly. But, opponent assists to turnover, number 10 nationally, 0.69. Both teams are excellent ball handling teams. Loyola's 1.312 in assists to turnover, ranking 26th, and Georgia Tech 14th. Obviously, the ACC is a little bit tougher conference, but not much after this year with the ACC. So, this is going to be a tremendous game to watch. And, you have to love Sister Jean, too. She was on ABC News last night, and just a riot. She was talking about how she prays for the team, but she prays more for Loyola than she does the opponent. It was just like, she's 102 years old, and she's just, such an adorable personality. I mean, you just can't help not to like her and just like the whole story behind Loyola. So with that, then we go down to Tennessee, Oregon State. Now here's another one that was on the sentiment barometer. Oregon State winning the Pac-12. So now all you hear about is Oregon State, Oregon State, Oregon State. It's a 12 seed. Here we go, upset. But Tennessee's a pretty darn good team. And I don't think there's a team in the Pac-12 that even comes close to Tennessee. Maybe USC. Maybe Oregon now that they're healthy. Dana Albin's great this time of year for Oregon too. But I think Oregon State has had their run, and they pulled it off. And now, and I'll say it, going up in competition. The Pac-12 used to be a tremendous conference for Hoos, but not now. And I think Tennessee comes away with the win and advances. Your thoughts?
I think there's a couple of cases to be made for Tennessee, John. First of all, I think if you were just going to take, power ratings wise, I don't think Tennessee should be a mere 7.5, 8 points over Oregon State. And talent wise, they're double digits better than Oregon State.
I agree.
We just talked about what it's going to be like for Georgia Tech to come from nowhere, Cinderella-type team, and win an ACC tournament, and now regroup in 5 days and get ready for this. Same applies to Oregon State, even more so. Georgia Tech had a legitimate shot. You and I did a show last week where we talked about Georgia Tech has a legitimate shot to win that tournament, and they did.
Yep.
Oregon State had no shot to win that tournament, and they did. So for head coach Wayne Tinkle to get that team back up again after accomplishing that, I find that hard to believe. And if there's one team in this 68-team field that came into the current college basketball season with extremely high expectations that they did not meet, it's Tennessee. This is an automatic reset button for them. If they're going to accomplish what they thought they should have accomplished, which, most preseason prognosticators and publications, John, saw Tennessee as the best team in the SEC. Alabama winds up winning it. Tennessee doesn't come close. And in fact, when you ask people, give me the best teams in the SEC, Tennessee's not one of the first three out of their mouths at this point in time. So to me, this is a team with all the motivation in the world from the better conference against a team that, again, I just don't see them duplicating, let's put it that way, duplicating what they just accomplished last week. And I just don't see it happening. And as I say, in my numbers, they should be double digits better than Oregon State. So I really like Tennessee here. I just, I know this 5-12 has become a phenomena, and I know that there's numbers to back it up. A 12 does end up beating a 5 somewhere along the way. I just don't think it's here. I think the class difference between these two is too much. In Tennessee, Rick Barnes certainly should have this team ready to go and try to make up for what they didn't produce in the regular season.
Yeah, and Tennessee, is one of those teams like if they want to play defense, it seems
Right.
they're one of the best in the nation. They have, if I remember right, 2 or 3 possible first round draft picks in the NBA. At least 2 of the 3 I think is realistic. Certainly all 3 would go in the first 2 rounds. And if they decide that they're going to play now and play all 40 minutes, they're going to be a team that could really make some noise. The defense still 20th nationally in scoring defense. They're 28th scoring margin, 12th in assists allowed. And it's not like they play super slow either. 44th in opponent assists per field goal made. So it goes on and on. Effective field goal percentage defensively, 25th. 16th in 2-point percentage allowed. And I guess the one thing I remember with Tennessee is that they don't shoot many threes. But if they do, it would open up the paint, obviously, for the big men that they have, and they would be even better. So maybe we'll see Barnes put that into effect, because I think that's the only thing that's missing with them with 3-point shooting. But what's interesting? They're 245th in 3-pointers attempted per game at 19.7. Oregon State is not far behind at 19.9, ranking 238th. So maybe Tennessee doesn't have to shoot threes in this game to blow them out. But I think if there's a blowout, it'll be Tennessee. So we're filling out a winning bracket here. Rob, we're going to be the first ones to ever have a perfect bracket. I can almost feel it. I'm kidding.
The chances aren't good.
Now we have Liberty against Oklahoma State. What's that?
The chances of a perfect
Oklahoma State
bracket are
versus
not
Liberty.
real good.
Oh, no, it's there might not ever be one. I mean, there's just so many factors that you cannot quantify with all the machine learning in the world. There's always that one game that, or more cases, like 9 games that destroy your bracket, and a lot of times it's on the first day. But this is an interesting matchup too with Liberty, and they're obviously a school that their football team did very well, and all their programs are heading in the right direction. I'm not sure they're ready to take on an Oklahoma State who ranked, I believe, as high as 4th this year in the top 25. And I think Oklahoma State will win this game handedly as well. They're third in strength of schedule, Oklahoma State is, versus Liberty, who's 327th out of the 357 Division I programs. So I think there's a bit of a mismatch in this one. Do you think a 13 seed could win, Rob, against Oklahoma State?
Well, it's interesting because of what we've talked about as far as concepts when handicapping these games in the tournament, and Liberty under Richie McKay. They're very much like Loyola. They're very if they played Loyola, the total might be 91 if these two teams played.
Yep.
This team is as slow as it gets, tempo-wise, which Oklahoma State's the exact opposite. So we're going to have to see if that slow tempo gets steamrolled or if it frustrates the other side. That's one decision you have to make here. And for as slow as they go, they're extremely efficient. I think I saw in Ken Palm's efficiency ratings offensively, they're in the 50s this year. So certainly the Atlantic Sun is not a great gauge where conference play is concerned, but I think Liberty has shown over the past couple of seasons that they'll step out and they'll frustrate some Power 5 teams. Oklahoma State won't be able to just roll the balls out and score 90. But that being said, John, they've played extremely tough defenses inside that conference, right? I mean, they play Texas Tech and Chris Beard. They play Bob Huggins' team is down a little bit this year, but generally speaking, a really good defensive team. And Oklahoma State, which just got Isaac Likely back within the last couple of days, is now whole as a team. And there's some young guys in this group that have come along this season very, very well. I mean, they're getting unexpected contributions, significant contributions from other guys on this team, younger underclassmen that are important to them. So while I think they'll win, I think it might be a frustrating experience for them playing this Liberty team. If they get out in front, John, it's just like a football game. If Oklahoma State gets out in front, Liberty really doesn't have any catch-up mode.
It's so true. Yep.
You can't just dribble the ball up, drain 30 off their 24 off the shot clock, and catch up that way against Oklahoma State. So will they be able to keep OSU out of the lane without fouling? There's a lot of problems for this team. The one positive for them, and the one that could help them be a problem for Oklahoma State, is the tempo. And if they can lull Oklahoma State into that type of game and keep it close, 6-8 points the whole way, then we're stuck in one of those March Madness type games. We'll see how it goes. I think Oklahoma State wins. I just don't know how easy it'll be for them.
Yeah, you're right. With Liberty getting behind, it'd be like watching a triple option type of offense try to come back.
No chance.
And to Liberty's credit, they did beat Mississippi State and South Carolina during the non-conference portions. So I mean, they're not super quality wins, but they're wins against the SEC nonetheless.
Right.
So moving on here to San Diego State, Syracuse. Now here's one I really like, because it seems like Syracuse is that misfit team that gets into the tournament. Everybody thinks, well, how the heck did they get in? They don't deserve to be in. But then it seems that what happens is that Boeheim all of a sudden is in the Sweet 16. And I kind of have a feeling that that's going to happen here again. The public is betting San Diego State. I call it irrational exuberance, which is what Alan Greenspan said a long time ago. He was the Federal Reserve Chairman when I was working on Wall Street. So I always remember that term, irrational exuberance. So when you do get the public betting it at this kind of level, and I've gotten away, Rob, from doing the Joes and the pros, and I just lump them all together. So when the percentages are 75% and greater, that's a red flag. And in this case, it's a red flag to take San Diego State. And I do like Syracuse. I like Boeheim. You see, there's the pedigree. Coaching is so much important in the tournament, and he just finds ways to pull it off. So if they're, as opposed to the 12-5 being the upsets this year, I think the 11-6s are where the upsets are going to occur most, and this is certainly one of them.
Yeah, I would say real quick from a standpoint of matchups here, San Diego State has to come in and face Syracuse's matchup zone, which can be tough to decipher right away, especially when you're a team that is not known for offense to begin with. I mean, San Diego State has had games where they've gotten up, and I think that, since the head coaching switch 2-3 years ago to Brian Dutcher, I think Dutcher has allowed this team to run a little bit more than they did before. But they're still not known as a high output team as far as scoreboard production is concerned. Syracuse, I think, running into the San Diego State defense has the same problem, John, because Buddy Boeheim all of a sudden has made a real name for himself, and the bullseye is on him. And San Diego State is a great perimeter defense, and I would be very surprised if he gets open looks in this game against this defense. So to me, each defense becomes the best unit on the floor, and Syracuse hasn't had a great defensive season, right? As far as Jim Boeheim years go, this has been one of the most highest scoring as far as game totals are concerned, Syracuse team that I can remember in recent history. But I think it's all about the inability to see it previously is what it comes down to here. For San Diego State, it may take a half before we figure out where the holes are, how we can attack this zone. And again, as I mentioned, I think Shackle is the one kid that can really shoot threes for San Diego State. But otherwise, it's a penetrating type team, a methodical team. I almost look under in this game because I think it might take a half to get going. And in the case of Syracuse, if Buddy Boeheim doesn't get going, maybe they don't get going at all. So to me, the number was a little bit high where total is concerned. I realize Syracuse has played a lot of games that have gone over this particular number. But this matchup to me just screams of, 68, 65, somewhere in that vicinity, which keeps you underneath the total. So I'm probably going to try that direction.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's just a simple system here that supports the under. 60% winners last 5 seasons play under neutral court situations with an excellent defensive team like San Diego State allowing 63 or fewer points per game and is facing a defense that is averaging or allowing 65 to 70 points per game. So you have a really good defense in scoring against one that's kind of middle of the road to slightly above average in Syracuse. So that is hit 60% of the time in neutral court situations. Yeah, I agree. I think the under is the play. Yep. And we have 3 more to go, and then we're done with the first show, the first 2 regions. We have West Virginia at Morehead State. I kind of worry about this one because in the brackets, 94% of brackets done on ESPN and CBS combined are 94% on West Virginia. And of course that means 6% on Morehead State, who's in the Ohio Valley. I can't make a case for Morehead State to pull off the upset though. So I'm gonna defer to you because my brain is racked here trying to figure out if this is actually one that you can play to look for that monumental upset or not. But I'll defer to you.
Yeah, well, I've got a little familiarity with OVC. My oldest went to Belmont University, which is always the kingpin of that conference. So I follow Belmont really closely. Morehead State did beat them in the championship game. Now for Belmont down the stretch, their best player, their center, Nick Muzinski, was banged up on a bad ankle. And Morehead certainly took advantage of it the night that they played in the championship game. And Morehead shot lights out. They have a center, a freshman center, excuse me, by the name of Johnny Broom, who was fantastic in that game. Now the kid's a shot blocker. He's a really good low post presence offensively, and there are those in the know, John, that think he might try to enter the NBA draft off of just one freshman year from Morehead State. I think that John Morant stayed more than 1 year, I believe. So, but that's the type of talent that he brings. All that said, West Virginia's loaded. West Virginia's very tough. I don't think Morehead State wins this game. The price is 13 for a reason. Started 12, got up to 13. Because Morehead State is predicated, as much as we've talked about these teams on this show in these two particular regions, they are predicated on defense under Preston Spradlin. They want to keep you in the 60s. They are very focused, and they've got the athletes to compete. So I'm not selling them short. But West Virginia is the exact opposite. They want to get out. They want to go. They make threes, and they do have guys that will give Broome trouble underneath. The Ohio Valley, for, as decent a conference as it is with the Murray States and Eastern Kentuckys and Belmont, really big men are at a premium in that league. West Virginia is going to run 2 or 3 bigs out there against Broome, and he's going to be in a different world. We're going to find out what his pro prospects are in this particular game. So to me, it's West Virginia. The talk of Morehead State started as soon as that Belmont game ended. Oh, watch out for Morehead State. Nobody wants to play them. And again, it all depends on who you match up with, and I just think West Virginia is a bad matchup for this team. I don't think that they're going to be able to keep them in the 60s, and I don't think that they're going to be able to rely on their defense to win this game for them, which basically makes them a loser in this game in my mind. So bracket-wise, I have no problem moving West Virginia through. Laying 13, West Virginia can find their way to 80 pretty easy. That's a tougher call, but I like West Virginia.
Yeah, it's a different Bob Huggins team too this year with the guard play of McBride, McNeil, and Sherman, and then you have the big guy Culver, and they're very efficient on offense. I think they're a top 10 offensive team in most of the efficiency ratings that I remember looking at, and that's a little bit different than Huggins. I always associate defense with Huggins, and this team is. It has all the parts. It has all the parts to make a run. So I was trying to see if this was a possible upset, but clearly it is not.
Their path is not tough, John. I wish I had gotten a West Virginia future. I'm just looking at it as we speak, but, the winner of Syracuse, San Diego State, which West Virginia will be favored in, and when push comes to shove, the highest-ranked team in that region is Houston, and West Virginia-Houston would be a heck of a ball game. So you're right. They've got all the parts, and they can shoot it. Wow, can they shoot it.
Yep. Yeah, that is interesting because that could easily happen. Actually, a better matchup might be Rutgers if they could beat Clemson and then beat Houston. Yeah, they're battle-tested Big Ten, but that is the next game, number 7. See, Clemson is number 10, Rutgers. That's on Friday at 9:20. And, this game is lined pretty close to pick. And, this is one where I'm pretty confident in taking Rutgers, at the window tomorrow. And, I may not even do the 50% pre-flop. I might just bet it 4% and done and over with. I just think they're a very good ball handling team. Clemson has been largely inconsistent. A lot of the stats are even on the I call them the flash stats, like scoring defense, scoring offense. They offset one another, making it look like it is a pick'em game. But I think Rutgers has the stuff, even though it's been 30 years since they've been in the NCAA tournament, and that shocked me. I had no idea it was 30 years. I thought, well, maybe 8, because they did have that one year that was incredibly good, didn't they, Rob? And some guy got suspended for something dumb, and that was the year that they were really good. But I think Rutgers here over Clemson, and they'll advance to play the winner of Houston and Cleveland State, which will be Houston.
Yeah, I could go back to that 1976 Final Four team with Phil Sellers and those guys for Rutgers back then. I'm with you, John. I mean, I will bet Rutgers out of spite just because it's against Clemson. To me, Brad Brownell has had 10 years to try and change that team into something different. And it's the same Clemson team year after year after year. I think if you're breaking these teams apart, and what would separate a team in a game that's lined this close, who's got the better big shot maker? I would take my chance with Geo Baker or Ron Harper Jr. I think they're qualified at crunch time and they've proven to be qualified to win a game for you. I don't know who that is on Clemson. Clemson's known for their defense. They try to win games on defense. To me, Rutgers, and again, you talked about it, we talked about it at nauseum here, the grinder that was the Big Ten. Rutgers made it through that league very, very competitively and ends up in an NCAA tournament. So I just don't think much of Clemson. I think that's a team that's prone to 7.5-minute spurts where they score one basket, which ultimately loses them a ball game. Defense can only carry you so far in modern day basketball. I mean, I know the slogan defense wins championships. I get all of that, but you can't win if your team is only a defensive team. You've got to be able to score at some point in time. And to me, when I go down these rosters, I'll take the guys that Rutgers has, and I'll take my chances with them scoring or putting together a little 10-0 spurt or whatever it's going to take to separate them from Clemson. I think that they're probably the right side here. And I hope I'm not saying that just because I'm being spiteful towards Rod Brownell and Clemson, but I do think Rutgers the better team. Yeah,
I agree. They're lastly, their assisted turnover ratio, they're 49th, 1.22 in the nation. Clemson sloppy, 134, 1.045, barely getting more assists than turnovers. And turnovers are a big factor in these kind of matchups too that are pick 'em. Free throw shooting is not Rutgers' forte, one of the worst in the nation at 63%. Let's hope they're up by 15 and that we don't get into a foul shooting contest because Clemson is good at 77%. And that's the only advantage I see Clemson having. If Rutgers is winning, with 5 minutes to go by 7 and it becomes a foul fest, then, you can have the right team and lose.
And let's make a quick point here, John, because free throw shooting becomes very important in these tournament games. And I just want to point out to people that you can't just look at a team and their overall shooting percentage. There's a lot of times, Rutgers is not an instance in this, by the way, but there's a lot of times where one 53% free throw shooter drags the entire team percentage down. You could have 4 guys shooting 75 or better, and one guy shoots 53, and then they're in the 60s. Rutgers isn't that way. Rutgers only has 2 reliable free throw shooters. I think probably Young and Harper are the 2 guys you would like to see on the line.
That's
the
right.
Rest, you're a little bit scared of. But there's teams like Missouri where Jeremiah Tillman at center is such a miserable free throw shooter that it drags the team percentage down. But the guards shoot it really well on that team. I think they've got 4 guys over 80. So, again, don't just use the overall statistic. Try and break down the top 7 scorers. If you get somebody else on the line other than the lousy shooter, you're not in that bad a shape, even though your overall team free throw percentage might say you are.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's where coaching comes in then too, because if you're up 7 with 5 minutes to go, you're going to make sure that those guys that throw bricks up there are not in the game. So, that tandem of guards that Rutgers has, I think you can make a case is one of the best in the country as well. And you know they're going to be in the game if they're up by 7 with 5 minutes to go. And they'll make sure that they're fouled. That's a great point, Rob.
Right.
Great point. And the last game on the table here is number 2 Houston against Cleveland State. Cleveland State out of the Horizon League went 19-7, 16-4 in conference. Houston, despite several interruptions, ended up playing 27 games, 24-3, 14-3 in the American Athletic. And I actually can't remember the last time American Athletic team was ranked 3 or higher. And maybe you can tell me the answer to that. But as much as I think Houston is overrated, they are a very good team. And sentiment from the machine learning applications has labeled Houston as one of those ugly ducklings that nobody has going to the Elite Eight, let alone the Final Four. So, does Houston have the ability to go to the Final Four? And I have absolutely no clue, to be honest with you, but I do know that they'll beat Cleveland State, and I think, Rob, you'll probably agree with me on that.
Yeah, I think they might be a little high priced. Just as far as point spread is concerned, not as far as advancing them in your bracket. And I think that, I feel like Houston was in the Elite Eight a couple of years ago against Kentucky in a game where they had every opportunity to win in the last minute, 50 seconds, 40 seconds, 30 seconds, just opportunity after opportunity, and it didn't fall their way, and Calipari escaped with a win. I think that was an Elite Eight game. It might have been a Sweet 16. I'm not sure, but I know that team under Kelvin Sampson went a long way, and they've got the goods. Once again, it's a team that's sporadic offensively. They're never going to lose their defense. That defense is as intense as any in the country, but the shooting goes in and out. And it's the difference between Houston winning games 80-55 and Houston winning games 67-60. Cleveland State, there's a little bit of familiarity here. Dennis Gates, the head coach for Cleveland State, was actually recruited by Kelvin Sampson. So it's it's not exactly a pupil teacher deal, but they do have a little bit of history with them. Dennis Gates, for those who don't know, was a part of the Florida State Seminoles assistant staff for 7 of their tournament runs here between 2010 and 2020. So he's very familiar with what it's like to be here. His team is pretty veteran. The guards are really good, and his team is predicated on defense. Now, the Horizon isn't the greatest league in the world, but neither was the AAC this year. You could point to a lot of opponents, Tulane, Tulsa, lousy teams that Houston beat up on. Push came to shove. They had trouble with Memphis twice. Memphis probably the second most talented team in that league, and almost didn't beat Memphis in the AAC tournament. So Kelvin Sampson is such an intense head coach that I think his team will be ready. But I also think Cleveland State will match that intensity. When you come from Leonard Hamilton's system the way Gates does, and he brought that whole formula with him to Cleveland State, and he's now won the head coach of the year award in the Horizon 2 years in a row since he's gotten there. He's brought that defense, that deeper rotation type of team here. And like I say, he's got really good guards. One of the guards was Defensive Player of the Year. So I think they can hang within 20, John. If they pull the upset, it's the shocker of all, not of all shockers, but it's a shocker.
Yeah,
obviously at plus 20. But I think they're good enough to cover, and I think that they'll be competitive enough to cover. Houston, when you look at the total in this game, it shows you, and it's generally Houston games are lined between 125, 136, and 137, somewhere in that vicinity. You don't expect a ton of points to be scored. So to me, and if Cleveland State gets to 56, you cover, because I can't see Houston getting more than 75. So 75-56 is still a cover for Cleveland State. Can they get to 56? I think in this opening round they probably can.
Yeah, it's a good point. If you the total 1 it's basically a 77 game. And you're right. It is reasonable to think that they can get to 57. Especially if it's 20 points, because then like you said earlier in the show, the bench players can come off or come into the game. The starters go out, and then it just becomes trading baskets for the next 8 minutes. And it's been great, and putting you on the spot here, what would be your just for the show purpose, what would be your best bet out of these two regions?
I think of the games we talked about, just because it would combine a fundamental advantage with a motivational advantage, at least in my mind. I think Tennessee would be the best bet, John. I think that for Oregon State, again, we went through it. We don't have to go through it again, but they're the far better team, talent-wise, inside and out. And I just can't see Oregon State doing what they did last week all over again. For me, it's a complete reset for Tennessee. They can make some noise in this tournament. There's some of these middle-of-the-road teams. I don't want to call them middle-of-the-road, but some of these teams that aren't being mentioned as Final Four
Yep.
possibles that, we talked about West Virginia might have a path. It's a real good team. Tennessee might have a path. They're that good. So I think they would be the best bet for me in this price range. This is not asking a whole heck of a lot of them if they come with their A game.
Yeah, I agree with you on that pick. I truly do, and I will add West Virginia to our list of best bets. And that's the best region, I think, in the tournament in terms of the competitiveness of some of these games down the road. It's gonna be fun, period, no matter what region. But this one seems to have a little extra spice to it. So, Rob, I guess that'll be it for this show. But before we leave, I know you probably have some exciting stuff going over at Wager Talk you'd like to share with everybody. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. At Wager Talk, John, I think we've discussed it before, but the way we package our selections is a percentage of bankroll. We're trying to money manage all of our clients through this the way we as professional bettors manage ourselves. 3, 4, 5% being the top, the cream of the cream. And I do have a 5% play going for this opening round in NCAA tournament play. It's up and available right now at wagertalk.com. As we film this, you can get selection packages for NIT or, as I mentioned, the NCAA. And you have to be checking all the time because these games are rapid fire. We go to sleep, we wake up, more plays are up. We go to sleep, we wake up, have to put more plays up. So continue to check them out. wagertalk.com. My homepage, of course, Rob Veno.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't recommend them more for those that are listening. And you're not making a mistake by getting a subscription in any of them. Even if you just get the NCAA tournament, it's a great investment in yourself to allow a guy with more than 25 years of experience to work for you. And that's a good way to look at it. You're hiring him to help you out. So I guess for today, that's it, Rob. And we'll be back Friday, either sometime that we'll tweet out there on Twitter, but probably between like 9:30 and 10 with some last-minute thoughts and also the breakdown of the last two regions. And then it's going to be rock and roll. That's when it starts. So, yeah, we'll probably have bags under our eyes by Sunday, but it'll be well worth it. So for Rob Veno, myself, and the Predictive Playbook, we'll see you tomorrow. And remember, may all the wins be yours.